What do we think? Did anyone speak up in the lecture theatre? Any of you? Did anyone have a thought in the lecture theatre?
Well, I think that the babies have like a good 80 years hopefully, and then the older men probably have if they're lucky 20. So I think should run over the old men.
So the relevant factor is how much longer they have left in their life.
I guess how much potential they have to have a.
Okay, so you're making your decisions on how much potential they have for quality life.
Yes.
Which may just be the length, but it may also be other things.
Sure.
Yes.
I don't know for sure about what I would do, but if you run over the old man, you're going into the lane that you're not supposed to be in. So there's a likelihood that you'll get into a car crash as well. So I think that you should run over the babies.
In the moment, would you be following the deontological sense, the laws of traffic, or the more moral approach, or ethic-based approach that Owen was talking about, we're in a consequentialist-based theory? I mean, if you're in I don't know. I think it's because we perceive this problem from a very remote position and perspective, and it's very hard to be able to tangibly be in that position and then make that moral choice. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I would do.
I think if you were in that position, you probably just go. You see butterfly babies.
Yeah, I mean, if you're facing what, yeah.
So there's a distinction between what we would say we should do sitting here and what someone who's in the moment and has to make an immediate decision would do. And would you say you can't judge that person as wrong? So say, whatever we decided here, the person in the moment decided the opposite. Does that mean they're wrong? Or does that mean they just made a different decision because of the situation they were in?
Yeah, and I feel if you're in an immediate decision, you wouldn't really be able to process maybe the age and I don't know, you could probably tell the height difference and stuff, but I don't know, yeah.
I think because it's a self-driving car, so they're programmed beforehand, so it's really a unique position in which, because if someone is in a car accident where they have a situation like this, they can't really be judged for making moral or immoral decisions because it's the in the moment kind of thing, and you can't really weigh that up from a moral perspective. But it's the case of programming the self-driving cars, so there is actually an opportunity to weigh up all the pros and cons of the situation from an outside removed perspective beforehand.
So the engineers are like us, sitting here having a deep think about it.
Yeah.
But, so did you say if it was an actual driver who had to make a split-second decision, there's no morality involved? You can't say they did the right or wrong thing?
I wouldn't say that, but I'd say that there's so many more factors involved from being in the situation that are negated if you're sitting in a room discussing it.
Are there so many factors that we cannot possibly judge them for the action? Or can we still judge them on the basis of some morality, even if it's different from how we might judge the engineers?
I'm not sure. So,
In terms of the engineers, yeah, I mean, for example, with Lambda, which is Google's massive AI, it's there is racial bias that plays into it. If a group of white tech guys from Silicon Valley are sitting down and engineering the AI for the self-driven car, then there are going to be biases implemented within the technology that are going to, hinder different, that are going to make biased decisions in that spur of the moment, swerve or, kill some babies, right? I mean, if it was people of color or a group of white people, that might, determine which way the car swerves or which, but I mean, part of the problem with that technology is that it is such an immensely and vast, sort of robust, AI, that it's very hard to tease out all of those biases. And I think, so if we're in the context of a future where those technologies reign supreme over all of the cars that we use, and is implemented in a lot of technologies and sort of influences how we make our decisions, then I think a lot of the responsibility should be on the system,
And do you think it's inevitable that the system will have bias because it's individual humans creating the system, or do you think there's some way to get around individual bias?
I think so. To meet Gebru, she was hired by Google. She's a woman of color, and she wrote an article. She wrote a text on the racial bias in AI. She was fired for her article. That she attested that on a small scale, you can identify those biases, but on a larger scale, it's a lot more difficult. And I think because we're we're approaching traversing into a world where it is so globalized on that macro scale, then I think in that scenario, I don't think it would be very difficult to be able to tease out those biases.
So what might we actually do? If you imagine you're the engineer right now, biases of your individual background may influence you. The fact that you're making these decisions in a planned way rather than a split-second decision as a driver may influence you. What would you actually think is the way to plan this as an engineer? What would you actually do?
Well, I think I would follow the law, and for me personally, I would kill the babies, because I think, especially towards older people, people tend to have a bias towards them, and by saying they're going to die anyway, that doesn't take away from their potential to have a good life, and they were doing the right thing morally, and they were following the law, and I think that, especially as people get older, people have less respect for older people, and by throwing them in nursing homes and stuff. And I think that just because they're older and they could die sooner, that doesn't take away from the potential to have a good life.
So perhaps that's one of the biases that we have. 30 to 60-year-olds who are engineers who might be programming this. We don't have potentially many 80 or 90-year-olds programming this, and so there's an age bias there. And so your way around that is to just say, whatever the law is, that's what the decision should be. What do you think about this? Have we solved this problem? Follow the law, and there will be no trouble.
I think from an engineer's perspective, follow the law, but then if you're actually in the car, you probably swerve. Because you think, I've got to save these people, but you wouldn't really think, I'm going to kill these people doing that. You wouldn't think that. You'd just be save someone.
So you wouldn't think that. But should you think that? Is it your responsibility?
I don't think you can blame someone for killing someone from wanting to save someone.
In any situation?
I can't think of another situation where I'd be no.
So you're escaping any sort of moral blame by making a decision where your intention is something positive.
Yeah.
So I intended to save someone even though it had these negative consequences.
But if you were an engineer, you'd probably, at least me, I would remember that it would kill the person who wasn't abiding by the law, because you wouldn't be thinking, what if it were babies, what if it were someone who was super famous, you wouldn't be thinking that they didn't abide by the law.
really goes into the intention versus outcome debate, which is really interesting. Especially like in an AI perspective, because there is more chance to control the intention. But I think it's interesting because the outcome won't always be controlled, I guess. Especially, so if all the cars follow the laws all the time, there will be circumstances when the car could have swerved to avoid hitting someone and it didn't. And someone would die even if there aren't another person that it could hit, or even slow down or brake really hard on the road to avoid someone. Yeah.
It's like an interesting sort of dynamic between like a principle-based ethical approach and then consequence-based ethical approach. Yeah. Interesting dynamic.
And if we're saying it depends on context, so whether you're an engineer or whether you're a driver, does the moral philosophy you use also differ based on context? So do you think an intention-based moral philosophy is better in some circumstances and a consequence-based philosophy better in others? Or is one always better than the other? Is intention always more important than consequence? Or is consequence always more important than intention?
If we look at like utilitarianism, which is basically just looking at the outcome all the time, and the example of there's a doctor who could kill a perfectly healthy person to harvest their organs to save 5 people who are dying of organ failure. So in that case, you'd say from an outcome perspective, you've saved the 5 people and killed the 1, but there's also the doctor has taken a vow to cause no harm, and there's a lot of ethics involved and like that bodily autonomy because even you can't take people's organs unless they've signed or if they're only signs or something.
Also with that little experiment is that he had the intention of killing someone. But like with the swerving thing is that when you do it, your intention was just to save someone, not to kill someone. And I think that in the one that you're talking about, to kill someone came before saving someone. Do you know what I mean? So I think that that's different when saving someone came before killing someone.
But it's still interesting, like beneficence and like in terms of priorities. Like,
So it sounded like you were saying there are things that override consequences. And one of the things you mentioned was bodily autonomy. So regardless of the consequences, you can't override someone's bodily autonomy.
Yes. Do say that hesitantly, because again, it's a situational basis.
Alright, so we are about to finish right now. You're all saying, I'm moving though. So this was a really interesting conversation. It was a bit shorter than the others because we spent a lot of time in the theatre. But this philosophical problem of intention versus consequence, and then other factors that may be relevant like bias or like a principle like bodily autonomy, and how that impacts on the decisions you make is something to think about.